Hi, welcome. Shun, we are loving having you join us for this little snippet in the last breathe. And so I'm just really grateful that you're able to join us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure. It's good to see you again.
You're welcome. Great. Well, I'm going to keep in stride with and in step with everybody else and kind of the format that we've done. So I'm just going to share how I know you. And then I'm going to share the chapter, kind of a snippet of chapter 52 from your book, which we've been gleaning from since June. So we're just on the last stretch here, and we're gonna.
I hope you all have enjoyed it.
It's been great. It's been great. So I met Shun Lee, gosh, this was back in probably 2001 through a songwriters group at Monica and Todd Eby. Some of you guys know them, and Monica shared, oh gosh, I think she shared back in August, way at the beginning. So we go back to, we had a music group that we named ourselves Group Therapy.
Right.
You remember that. And so we played coffee shops, did some craft, just learning the craft of songwriting and playing and just communing. And it was just a really, really great community at that time in my life that I just really cherished all these years and still love having all the friendships through the years. So it's been nice to stay in touch, Shun Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a great group, wasn't it?
It was a great
back
group.
in the day. Yeah.
Yes. So here we are, fast forward many years, which took you on an interesting journey that you were led to move to Hollywood through a series of events. And now if you can just maybe share in a nutshell of all the things that you have your hands in, but just in general, can you just share with the group just what you're doing there and just an overview of that?
An overview. Oh, boy, that takes a long time because I wear a whole lot of hats there. And what's interesting is that all the things I do are things that God has taken from the past and brought them forward so that I can utilize them. And nothing gets wasted is one of the things I've learned because I was a lawyer in Omaha for 5 years. And you're right, felt called that it was time to stretch my creative wings and moved out to Los Angeles, where I got started as an actor. And I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild there. So I'm a professional actor and have done a number of projects in film, television, commercials, print, voiceover, etc. Of course, actors have a lot of time on their hands. So in between, I started writing. So I've written a number of screenplays, and as well as the book that you guys have gone through. And I hope you enjoyed that. I also, there it is, The Saints and the Poets, and starting to think about writing a sequel to that. We'll see what happens. The thoughts are starting to germinate a little bit, which is nice. So be on the lookout for that. But I run a production company called Genuine Productions. And we've done a number of short films. Currently, I am a producer on an upcoming animated series with a guy who plays Larry the Cucumber from VeggieTales, Mike Naraki, and a guy from the 80s music scene, Steve Taylor. We're business partners, and we're working on an animated series that hopefully will be out and by the end of this year, or maybe early next year, called The Dead Sea Squirrels. Mm-hmm. And I'm also a producer on a couple feature films that are in the works right now, with some more on the way. Also, I told you there's a lot. So I teach entertainment law at a number of colleges. So that's how God took the law part and redeemed that. So I get to really speak into a lot of young artists' lives as they're coming up through the ranks, various colleges across the country. And then I also run basically a collaborative creative community called The Greenhouse. And that's been going since 2007. We've probably had 9,000 or more people from all over the world come through there. The opportunity just to create together, to be in community together, to serve one another, serve the community. That's really what we're all about. And it's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to, if you want to use the word minister that way, but just to be with other people as creatives, you guys know that it's not always easy to find people who think the same way you do. And so to find other people who are creative, who are artists, who are artistically inclined, and to bring them together in a way that serves one another has been just really fulfilling. So, and there's a number of other stuff I do, a number of other things that I do, but yeah, that takes up a lot of my time. So
I just love your vision for Greenhouse. And I'm just going to give everybody the website. It's greenhouseproductions.com. And as far as just other places you can find Shun Lee, you can find him on Twitter at Shun_Lee, at Facebook, obviously Instagram at Shun Lee Fong, Fong. So, and that's at the back of this, the Saints and Poets book, if you've got that. So, and just to clarify, I know you said what sounded like scrolls, but I know it is Dead Sea Squirrels.
Dead Sea Squirrels, yes. The story is these squirrels back in Jesus' time that were calcified by the Dead Sea, and then they got reanimated in modern times. It tells stories about Jesus, and of course there's all the silly songs that you got used to with Silly Songs with Larry and VeggieTales. So there's lots of that coming as well. It's a lot of fun and very funny. You're going to enjoy it. Yeah.
I love it. When can we expect that to maybe?
We're about halfway through our 13 episode series for this first season. And we sure hope it'll be out by the end of 2022, but we'll see. Just stay tuned. I'll be sure to announce it through the various social media. So if anybody wants to follow me there or get in touch with me there, I'm always happy to see who else is out there, and we can all be in creative community together.
Love that. Awesome. We'll look forward to that. Okay, so we are kind of winding this. Breathe is called the summit. So we've kind of made it to this top end here, which I feel like, just looking back, I feel like it's just a launching pad for whatever's next for individuals creatively. And one thing I love about the different speakers that have come on, and I guess they're kind of essays, each chapter, they're kind of vignettes, and you're sharing different parts of your life and experiences in Hollywood and just life in general. But I like that anybody can relate to each little vignette. So that's one thing I've really, really appreciated.
That's good.
So I'm having you end on chapter 52, last chapter of the book, called The End of the Story. So what I'll do is I'm just going to read the snippet that I took from chapter 52 and then have you answer the questions from there as you feel led.
Great.
Okay, so here we go. Page 199 for any of you following along. I wonder what my life would be like if I lived as if I truly believed what God has told me about how my story will go. I wonder what grand decisions I might make, what incredible adventures I might go on if I took the time to find out what promises God has for me and then lived as if I believed him. How would this world be different? I have a feeling I will live more daringly when I completely believe that God will supply all of my needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. I will leap more eagerly when I entirely grasp that he looks to strongly support those whose hearts are completely his. I will stride more confidently when I understand that this is indeed my Father's world and I walk with his authority as his son. When I understand that this, after all, is how the story goes. The people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits, Daniel 11:32. And then closing, knowing how this story goes just might enable us to live out our lives complete and without fear. Love that. Compromise or regret, and perhaps get us a good night's rest in the process. There's a lot packed in there. So I just wanted to just start with I know your journey and how you got there. Gosh, I really wish you could share with people the story that I know about how you got there and how you had to seek the Lord for like 6 days up on a lake and never heard anything to the very last day. and then God spoke. So anyway, in a nutshell, but since you got there, can you share 2 to 3 ways God has come through, been faithful, and met your needs as you've embarked on the journey he gave you to minister to those in Hollywood?
Well, that's a really good question. And thank you for reminding me of those words in that last chapter, because I think that what we say we believe and what we really believe, the difference between the two is how we behave and the steps that we actually take. You can see what a person actually believes just as a person by the actions that they take. And I grew up in the church. I grew up with this understanding of who God is and what his means of redeeming us have been through Christ. But saying that I believed it and then actually taking the things that I said I believed and making them real by turning them into action, there was this wide gap. And so that chapter, I mean, I'm speaking to myself now, that's really amazing, that we can step out in faith, knowing what God's promises are. And so to answer your question about like some of the things that God has done to provide for me, because when I left Omaha, when I laid down my law career and said, okay, I'm going to do this out of obedience, there was a tremendous amount of fear, because there's this idea that if you step outside the norm, then things are going to go badly. Nobody's going to be there for you to pick up the pieces. And so you find this temptation to always kind of have a trump card, to say, well, I can always go back to law. I can always go back to whatever. And I remember at one point, God said, hey, you got to stop saying that. You got to stop saying that you could go back to law, because if I called you to this, then you don't get to keep that as a trump card. You don't get to have a trump card. You only have obedience. And it wasn't until that I said, okay, fine, I'm all in. I'm not going to keep one foot on the boat and one foot on the shore, because that is just a great way to get all wet. I decided that I'm all in on this. And so once that process happened, God began to just show up in some really amazing ways. I'm not saying that he showed up in easy ways.
Right.
He showed up in amazing ways. One of those ways is just by surrounding me with like-minded people, many of them believers, many not, but people who had other gifts and strengths than I had. And there's this idea that we all carry, that we have to be like somebody, and that the people that surround us have to be exactly the same as us. Otherwise, there's going to be friction and we're just not going to be able to make it happen. But God was very faithful to put people around me that weren't like me, that carried other giftings and other strengths than mine, things that I didn't know how to do, because I think creativity and the arts are at its best when we have to rely on other people, when we don't think we can do it all ourselves. And that there's this humility that comes with that, where that you're like, I've got to be humble because I can't do it all. So that was one big way I think that God really provided for me. In terms of the greenhouse, we started the greenhouse in 2007. I had known for a long time that this was something that God was calling me to do, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. And I remember I had just moved to a new area in Los Angeles, and I didn't have a church in my area, and it was Christmas Eve. And I thought, well, I saw this church around the corner. Maybe I should just go. I should be at church on Christmas Eve. And so I went, and the pastor saw me, and he said, "You're a Christian, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am. Thank you." And he's like, "Let's have coffee." And he said something to me that I've rarely, if ever, heard any professional pastor say to me. And he said, "My job is not to get you to do my vision. My job is to get you what you need to do what God has called you to do." And so I said, well, I feel like I need to start this thing called the Greenhouse for artists, for creative artists, not just film and television, but all sorts of creative artists, how to serve one another and serve the community. And he said, "Great, here are the keys to the church building. Here's your office over here. And, just make sure it's locked up when you leave at night." So that began a series of God providing places for the greenhouse. LA is a very expensive place to be. Real estate is crazy. And here we have this pastor who's handing over resources to me, saying, do what God has called you to do. That went from that church that we quickly outgrew. We ended up at a place called the Shakespeare Club in Pasadena, which was this huge stone mansion and could pack people in there. And then we outgrew that. Then we ended up at CBS Studios for free. They're just giving us space, so a lot of favor. And we ended up at Netflix and all these different things. So God was providing the resources that were needed to create the thing that he called me to do, which was really cool. There wasn't this striving. Now, there were hard times, but there wasn't this thing that I had to do on my own. I think that's a big thing. And then, finally, I just say that God has been really faithful to surround me with, both there in LA, but also back in Omaha and other places, with people who are supporting me, praying for me, some financial support, whatever it is, they believe in the vision. And again, that's a very humbling thing, because then you realize I truly can't do this on my own. This is something that God has to make happen through other people and not just me. Yeah,
I love that. So I heard humility, provision, and support and community, like key things for anybody walking something out. Thank you. I'm just going to transition to the second question here. So this one is, maybe in just a few minutes, can you share what was one of your biggest fears you've had to overcome and moving forward with God's call on your life? And you spoke a little bit to that, and then what's helped you in overcoming that fear? Because I think that's such a big thing when people step out into new things, or just we want safety.
That's right.
We do.
That's right. Yeah, boy, that's such a good question. And maybe how I'll answer it is in the big picture, because there's lots of little areas that God has not only taken me through, but continues to take me through, because I am, taking a big step from being a lawyer into being professional artists and all the things that go with that. There's a lot of elements to overcome, and God continues to work those things out in me. I think the two things that I'd say, the fears that God has really had to deal with me on, is, first of all, and they're kind of tied to one another. One is the fear of what other people are going to think. As a lawyer, I had, this great job. I was getting paid every other week. I had respect because I had this profession, and suddenly I'm laying it on the altar and stepping away. And it was a difficult process to actually make that transition. But as Bono from U2 said, the opposite of fear is faith, and the opposite of faith is fear. You can't have both. You got to make a decision. Wow. And if you choose fear, fear is going to rule you. If you choose faith, you have the opportunity for faith to rule you, to become the lens by which you view the world, that you can walk through this world in faith. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to be great. It doesn't mean you're always going to have food on the table. It doesn't mean you're always going to be able to pay your rent. I had to deal with all of those things, but having God force me into a place, force in a very loving way, to make a decision between being ruled by fear and being ruled by faith, was probably one of the best things that could ever happen to me. And I'm continually working that thing out. That means that I don't get to be afraid of what other people are going to think. And that's really hard for us artists, because we're always thinking about, if I create this, what are people going to think? If I paint this painting, are people going to like it? If I make this film, are people going to like it? If I write this song and record it, are people going to like it? And the answer is not always. They're not always going to like it. And that's okay. One of the things I love about Pixar, and this leads to the other part of the fear, is the fear of failure. And one of Pixar's main, we'll call it mantras, if you want to call it that, is fail as fast as you can. In fact, they created this environment where failure is actually celebrated, because when you fail, you get closer to that which is actually going to work. And so God has been very faithfully putting me into situations where I am afraid, because then I have to push through it. That's the definition of courage, is pushing through the fear. And so, learning to not be afraid of failure is a big thing. And what God does, instead of saying, oh, I've conquered the fear of failure, you never get to that place. What he does is then ratchet up the stakes and say, oh, you could fail here too. Now what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to living by fear? Or are you going to rise to the challenge of this new, higher, bigger type of failure that you can have? And you get a choice every single time. That's creatively, that's in our relationships, that's in our professional aspirations. And what I've been learning over the last year is that true growth happens where you are uncomfortable. And we live in this place, we live in a society that avoids discomfort. And we have to push ourselves into that. We got to raise the stakes and accept the raised stakes that God gives us, and be okay with encountering that fear of failure every single time, and then pushing through. Yeah.
The nugget that I took was failure is celebrated. So is it worth it?
Is failure worth it?
Failure is celebrated, you said. Is it worth it?
It is always worth it.
Yes.
Failure is like a broken bone. Okay, you break your leg. I've never broken my leg. I've never broken a bone, but I've had a brother who has. And when you break it, when you fail, you come back stronger. And I remember at one point, this was several years ago, I remember I'd gone through some really tough times, professionally, creatively, relationally, all these things kind of happening all at the same time. And I remember really being in a place where there was a lot of doubt going on in my head. God, did you call me to this? Am I in the place I'm supposed to be? And I remember saying in my prayer time, I was like, God, I'm sorry, but my faith is not as big as it used to be. Yeah. And I remember getting an answer from him that surprised me. He said, you're right. Your faith is not as big as it used to be, but it's stronger than it used to be. And I would rather have strong faith than big faith. And so that in order to get to that place, we have to allow the bone to be broken. We have to allow for that brokenness to happen, because that's where the strength comes from. As we press through the brokenness, strength is the end result. That's the fruit of the brokenness, of the fruit of the failure, and pressing through that. So is it worth it? Yes. None of us like it. And I'm not asking any of us to like it. But at the end of the day, that is where we're headed. That's the outcome.
So encouraging. And it's just everyday life, whether you're an artist or not. I think that really speaks to so many people on a general level. So I love that. Thank you. That's so good. Just in closing, what is one piece of advice you would give to those who have said yes to what God's called or invited them into? And or currently maybe some people are just, they know God has entrusted this thing to them, whatever, to fill in the blank. It can
whatever
be,
it is.
Yeah, your job, whatever. What stands out to you the most with advice?
I've been thinking a lot over the last year about Ephesians 2:10. Ephesians 2:10 talks about how we are God's handiwork. Let's see here. I've got it right here. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And there's something really interesting about that verse, is that in one verse, God is saying that we are creators, that we have good works to do, and at the same time, we are being created. We are both the poet and we are the poem. We're both at the same time. And embracing that means that we are co-creators with God in whatever he has called us to do. And what has really stood out to me in the last several months is that God talks about the works that he created in advance for us to do. As creative people, we're always like, oh, what should I create next? What's the painting I should do next? What's the book I should write next? Whatever. And I've begun to ask God, what is it that you have created for me in advance to do? If that is true, that you have works prepared in advance for me to do, then the best thing I could do is find out what those are, which pushes me in towards him. It pushes me into a relationship of co-creation. It's not just me creating something, it's God and me creating something together, which seems kind of like, arrogant on one hand, but actually that's what that verse says, is that we are both creators and we are being created. And through that process, of creating whatever God's called us to do, we're living out being created day by day. I think that's really important to remember, that co-creation. And I'll say something somebody from Omaha said to me many years ago when I asked him the very same question that you're asking me. What advice do you have somebody who has been given a vision and has been asked to run with it? Because I had been in a church my entire life and nobody had taught me how to run with vision. Nobody had ever taught me. I was, here I am, a lawyer, and I don't know how to run with vision. So I asked this person, what do you do with this? How do you do that? And I remember so poignantly that the advice he gave me, which is don't be afraid of small beginnings. It's okay. Small beginnings are great because when you plant that small seed, it can eventually turn into something really great. And a lot of people don't plant the small seed because it's small. Right. They only want the big stuff. Yeah. But if you don't plant the seed, you don't get to the big stuff. That's not how it works. So you have to plant that seed, that small beginning, and allow it to grow over time and not feel the pressure of people around you saying, hey, why isn't it this yet? Why aren't you, A-list superstar? Why aren't you singing to sold out stadiums? Why are your paintings not being put up in galleries around the world? Well, it can get to that place, but it's okay not to be at that place. And why is that? The reason for it, and this, I'll bring it in for a landing here, is that when it comes to what God has called us to do and how he's called us to live our lives, everything is worship. Everything. Getting up in the morning is worship. Laying our head down at night is worship. Yeah. If I sit and write my journal, that's worship. If I make a film that fails, it's worship. If I do all these things, it's worship. If we begin to view through the lens that everything we do is worship, it changes the why of the things that we're called to do. Now it is not about self-fulfillment. It is not about even the people it's going to touch. Those are all just the icing on the cake. If we do everything out of an attitude, position of worship, that we do everything as unto the Lord, it changes the why of what we do, which means I could write my next book and nobody would read it and it would be an absolute success because it was worship. Yeah. I could make a film and nobody buys a ticket to see it. Yeah. Success because it's worship. So worship is success. That if we will view our lives through that lens, every day when we get up, we put those glasses on. This is how I'm going to view the world, is through the eyes of worship. Everything changes and everything becomes different in the scope of how you create and what you do and how you carry vision and how you carry yourself. Yeah.
Oh gosh, thank you so much. That shift in paradigm, and just that scripture, it can change everything for people.
Yeah.
Really.
Isn't that funny? We say that we've said those verses all our lives, but it's not until we actively step into the living out of the verse and all the uncomfortableness that comes with it, because truth is uncomfortable. Right. There's no insult like the truth, as Charlie Peacock once said. We have to be okay with that in order to truly gain the benefit of the truth. We have to live it out in a way that can be really uncomfortable, but it's always going to be good.
Oh, so rich. Shanley, thank you so much. I know you have plenty on your plate, so I just am really, really grateful you were able to share with us and join us in kind of the final stretch here, and looking forward to the more for people and just whatever else is on your trajectory for the next years to come.
Absolutely.
We're cheering you on in Omaha.
Oh, well, thank you. And I love hearing from people. If anybody wants to get in touch with me through the greenhouse or through social media, please feel free to do that. Okay. I know that you guys are really marching forward with building creative community, and anything I can do to help with that process, I want to be a part of that. So please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, greenhouseproductions.com. And travel companion. Y'all know about the travel companion, Saints and the Poets, and maybe we'll see round 2 down the road.
Yeah, it's in the works.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Shun Li. We just
Yeah,
wish
thank
you
you.
just the best and what's to come. So thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate it.
You bet. You guys all have a great night.
All right.